All right, good morning, everybody. A few announcements before we get started. If you have your Project 2 with you, hold on to it if you haven't already given it to Tony. It is due today. And also, those of you who have section today, you're having section up at the Bade Museum. And everybody knows where that is. You were able to get directions. Anybody not know where that is? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. It's on B-Space. Do you know where the GTU is? The Graduate Theological Union? No? Okay. It's up, if you go through Northgate and just basically up past Vowels, and you make your first left-hand turn, you just follow the palm trees. It's actually up where all those tall palm trees are. Past like Casa, it's not Casa Zimbabwe. It's one of the, what is it? One of the co-ops is there. But you just kind of keep going up to the top and you'll find it. But yeah, the directions are on B-Space too. So. All right. Okay, so, another announcement too, at 12 o'clock today, again, there's going to be a brown bag lecture in the ARF. So those are going to continue if you guys are interested in extra credit as well. I don't have a light today, so I'm going to see if I can do this. That's not good. That's fine. Let's just stick with this. All right, so last time we left off, we were talking about the city of Ugarit and how Ugarit really is this wonderful microcosm of the Late Bronze Age, right? As an independent city on the Syrian coast, it really exemplifies, not just in the text that we have from the site, but also in the site itself, the internationalism of the period. We talked about the architecture, we looked at the trade imports, and we left off last time talking about a specific shipwreck which may have come from Ugarit itself. This is the Uluburun shipwreck that was found off the coast of Turkey. And we looked at some of the objects from that shipwreck, specifically these bronze oxhide ingots. You can see again, several of these oxide ingots as they lie on the surface or on the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. Oxide ingots that would have been formed in molds like those at Ras Ibn Hadi, right? We looked at that subsidiary site 5 kilometers to the south of Ugarit, where copper would have been mixed with tin and made into bronze. And indeed, right, the Uluburun was carrying over a ton of these copper ingots and also 1/10 of a ton of tin, which is a perfect combination for bronze. So in addition to copper and these sort of hard artifacts, we looked at some of the organic trade goods that the Uluburun was carrying. Again, right, this is a shipwreck site, so we don't have any oxygen. And that's the really nice thing about this. Without oxygen, you don't have deterioration, and you're able to recover a tremendous amount of organic material, not just the actual pieces of the Uluburun itself, but actually evidence of dates, almonds, acorns, pine cones, pistachios, over 250 olive pits. And it's very interesting when we look at the types of materials recovered from the Uluburun in terms of organics, and then compare them to some of these Linear B tablets that are discovered in mainland Greece. This is a tablet that comes from the city of Pylos around 1300 BCE. And as you can see, these Mycenaean palaces, these very large palaces, which date to the end of the Late Bronze Age. This one you can see it's entitled The Palace of King Nestor. Nestor is the king of Pylos in the Iliad and in the Odyssey that Homer's writing about much later, right? Because Homer's in the 7th and 8th century. He's writing about a time that's much earlier. The tablets that we have from these actual palaces are written in a script known as Linear B, and it's a very early form of Greek. It was only translated actually in the 1950s by Michael Ventris. And what we find are these essentially palace lists. Not a lot of literature per se, but really just lists of objects, the prices that they were paid for them, and where they're going. And what we find are lists of items that are linked to the perfume industry. At Pylos, at Mycenae, there seems to be a tremendous amount of activity going on for creating perfumed oils. Actually, we see at Pylos huge storage facilities, similar to those that we saw at Hattusis, right, with those large pithoi, huge vats for containing and then redistributing goods such as oil. So the fact that the Uluburun shipwreck, the ship appears to be heading in this direction, given the current of the Mediterranean, and it's carrying these things like coriander, like safflower, and cardamom, things that aren't native to mainland Greece. We get a sense of really, these two things going hand in hand. That the Uluburun, in addition to carrying hard commodities like bronze, was carrying other things for the perfume industry at Pylos. It's very interesting. The Uluburun gives us an opportunity to really draw together a whole bunch of lines of evidence. I'll give you another example. A number of these Canaanite amphorae were found with the Uluburun. You can see them here, again, lying at the bottom of the sea. And chemical tests were done on these amphorae to see what they were carrying. And as it turned out, they weren't carrying wine or what you might expect. They were carrying the resin of pistachia, which is known as terebinth. And terebinth resin can be used as a perfume, as an unguent, but mainly it's used as incense. So when we find something like this, right, a commodity that through scientific testing we can now say these amphora carried pistachia resin, we can then go back to the text. We can then go back to the iconography. So for example, in the 18th dynasty tomb of Rechem Re, you can see it down here. This is a tomb of a noble courtier in Egypt, and we have a depiction of, right, a boat and goods being offloaded from it, a boat like the Uluburun, and we have, even in addition to that, very clearly depicted Canaanites offloading goods, and in fact offloading these exact store jars that we see in the shipwreck itself. We know they're Canaanites. You can see the way they're depicted with their headbands, their beards, their very typical headdress, their flouted skirts. Egyptians were very good at depicting the enemies of Egypt or foreign peoples. In this case, it's very clear these are Canaanites or Asiatics, people that are coming from the east and trading their goods. It's interesting, the goods are actually labeled in this depiction. And for a long time, we didn't know really what these goods were. Bak was one of the goods. We know bak is oil in Egyptian, but there was something else called senecher. For a long time, it wasn't clear what this was. We actually saw it over and over and over, the importing of senecher. Senecher, what is senecher? Is it a wine? Is it a foodstuff? And with the discovery of the Uluburun, now all of a sudden, right, we can put this evidence together. We can combine archaeology, we can combine text, we can combine image, and say, okay, well, this senecher, right, that we see in the tomb of Rechem Re is actually terebinth resin. And what Egypt is doing is importing massive amounts of terebinth resin from the Levant. Just to give you a sense of where this is, in the Annals of Thutmose III, we actually see 828 jars of senecher being imported at this time in 1 year of his reign alone. So this is a massive, massive commodity. The Uluburun, right, was carrying over 1 ton of this resin. So it's, again, just a great example of seeing how these systems of trade worked and the importance of finds like the Uluburun, which give us that much more information about the kinds of goods that are being moved around during this international period. The Uluburun probably stopped off in Cyprus along the way. And Cyprus, as we've looked at in the past, Cyprus is incredibly important during the late Bronze Age, particularly. We've seen Cyprus, we've actually talked about Cyprus in the beginning of the class, had a vibrant culture as early as the Chalcolithic period. This is the same island, right, that produces those Picrolite figurines, the self-referential ones. And that continues into the early and middle Bronze Age. Cyprus is attached to the Middle East, or to the Near East, but also to what's taking place in Greece. It's a point of transition. And for that reason, it's always been characterized by its very unique culture and its unique material culture. For example, in the Middle Bronze Age, it's characterized by these Cypriot red polished pieces of pottery, which again appear to have some sort of ritual function. You can see they're not exactly utilitarian, but are fascinating in the sense that they use applique, and you see these little narrative scenes of people bending down and worshiping before a shrine, small activities taking place, women holding children, just really, really unique and interesting stuff. Cyprus, in the late Bronze Age, begins to exploit its natural resources in the center of the island. The center of the island, there's an area known as the Troodos Massif, or the Troodos Mountains, which is incredibly rich in copper. And it's in the late Bronze Age that we see the emergence of a kingdom known as Alashia. It's not entirely clear if Alashia is the entire island, but we do have mention of the king of Alashia taking place in taking part in the international exchange that we see in the Amarna correspondence. The king of Alashia actually writes to the king of Egypt as a brother, and certainly is a great king in that sense. The city of Nkomi, particularly, is important, and it's possible that Alashia might relate just to the city of Nkomi or a confederation of other island coastal sites like Hala Sultan Teki and others that emerged during this period. When we compare Nkomi to Ugarit, we see a great amount of continuity. For example, at Ugarit, the things that made it unique as opposed to other Syrian sites, it's ashlar masonry, it's well-planned city streets and blocks. These are things that we also see at Nkomi at this time. Not just architecture, but also parallels in mortuary activity. People are actually buried, again, intramurally in communal tombs within the city itself, within the houses at Nkomi. We looked at the statue of Baal, these statues that are in a smiting pose, very similar statues from Nkomi, but in this case a different divinity, a horned divinity here, but made in the same style, these small standing bronze statues. And this one, he's actually called the ingot god. We call him the ingot god because we don't really know his proper name. But you can see the similarities to the Baal statue that we saw before, and you can see the reason he's called the ingot god. He's actually standing on one of these oxhide ingots. And when we look at the places in Cyprus where copper and bronze casting was taking place, the foundries are often associated with temples. So it seems that the production of bronze was possibly controlled and possibly linked to ritual activity taking place in the temples at Cyprus during this time. And that's a great way of controlling a commodity, right? If you make it a sacred activity,